So who did blow up the Nord Stream pipelines? Well, if we can believe the BBC, then all of us here in the West think the Kremlin was behind the Nord Stream pipeline attacks. So we don't know who did it, but it seems we do know who we think did it. At least that's what we are being told by the BBC. But is that really the case? I'm not so sure the story is quite that straightforward as they want to make it seem. Where is the evidence coming from that would justify such a far-reaching statement? And as a behavior analyst that focuses on linguistics, I immediately spotted the built-in plausible deniability because the BBC did not write that Putin actually did it, or even that the BBC thinks that Putin did it. They only wrote that we, the West, think he did it. So if it ever turns out that someone else did it, the BBC is in the clear. The question is, would Putin really blow up his own $20 billion pipeline that was his financial lifeline to the West? I mean, could he not simply have kept the valves closed? What you have to understand is that this pipeline was a technological masterpiece, a true marvel, and not just a couple of steel tubes on the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Its destruction is a serious blow for Putin, and while we are being told over and over that he did it himself, not everybody believes that's actually the case. Someone who definitely doesn't think that it was the Kremlin is the former Polish foreign minister Radek Sikorski. This became clear through his own, meanwhile deleted, Twitter tweet where he openly thanks the US for the attack. Remember Winston Churchill? He said that the truth is so precious that it has to be protected by a bodyguard of lies. So, is it not worth to have a closer look and try to find out how the bodyguards of lies look like that protect the truth about the Nord Stream attacks? Who had the motive, the means and the opportunity to execute such a brazen act of state terrorism, as the Lithuanian Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis called it? If we do look closer, we can identify at least 5 possible suspects. Russia, the US, Ukraine for obvious reasons, Poland and Turkey. Let's start with Russia. If we can believe the BBC, then Putin is threatening European gas supplies to weaken and destabilize Europe's governments and, as a consequence, reduce Western support for Kiev. Again, I noticed that the BBC only speaks of threatening the gas supplies, not killing it by blowing up the pipelines. Next in line is the US. The US was against the Nord Stream pipelines from the very beginning. Several high-profile officials have publicly voiced their concerns over the years. There are a multitude of reasons, but the most prominent are strategic and economic ones. The US views the combination of German know-how and Russian resources as a strategic threat. As Lord Ismay, the first Secretary General of the NATO, already said, the aim of NATO is to keep America in, Russia out, and Germany down. This statement has been reiterated in many variations over the years and is still valid today. You can verify it for yourself if you search the internet for Lord Ismay restated. And the US sees the destruction of the pipelines apparently as a huge opportunity. At least, that's how the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has called it. Is that not an interesting interpretation for an act of state terrorism against another NATO country? But why does Blinken speak of a huge opportunity? In his own words,
this is also a tremendous opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity to once and for all remove the dependence on Russian energy and thus to take away from Vladimir Putin the weaponization of energy as a means of advancing his imperial designs.
Another potential motive that would point towards the US is the faltering support of the European population for the sanctions against Russia. On the day before the explosions, Germany saw large-scale demonstrations against the rising energy and food prices that drive many people into misery. But demonstrations or not, with the pipelines destroyed, now for better or for worse, there's simply no way back. The motives for Ukraine are much more straightforward. Ukraine simply wants Russia to be deprived of the gas revenues so that it financially bleeds out in the war. Poland has a complex history with Russia too, but when it comes to the Nord Stream pipelines, Poland, together with Denmark and Norway, were direct competitors of Russia. The pipeline explosions happened on September 26. The very next day, coincidence or not, these three countries opened their own new Baltic gas pipeline with the stated aim to help Poland and Europe to reduce their long-standing dependency on Russian gas. Convenient, isn't it, when the competitor is taken out the day before you open your own business? The last suspect on our list is Turkey. Presidents Erdogan and Putin have recently agreed to expand the already existing gas distribution network and to establish a natural gas hub in Turkey. The details are not clear yet, but Europe could end up buying Russian gas with a premium via Turkey. This will not only boost Turkey's struggling economy, but will give President Erdogan a key position at the intersection between economic and strategic interests in Europe. But is that really a strong enough motive to risk the whole deal by antagonizing Putin? So who do you think did it? Who had the motive, the means and the opportunity, not to mention the audacity, to commit an act of state terror that has at best the potential to plunge Europe into an unprecedented energy crisis, and at worst could trigger a nuclear war with Russia and the West? Who would have the balls to pull this off, and who would have the power to get away with it? Before we continue, let's see what Professor Sachs from the Columbia University has to say about this.
Governments lie, so the public needs to have an understanding what's true, what isn't true. And we are engaged in so many lies right now. I think the Nord Stream is an example. By the way, a big consequence for Europe, because somebody blew up critical infrastructure, deprived Europe of its a crucial energy source. And then when the Swedes investigated, by the way, they say, oh, for national security reasons, we can't even share our findings with Denmark and Germany. Huh? Yeah. What could that mean? You know, that's pretty weird.
Before we move on from Nord Stream, because that's a topic which is highly, highly interesting for one particular reason, because we don't hear anything anymore. Yeah, it's just gone. Yeah, so I took the liberty. I took a couple of statements from U.S. officials. Yeah, let's start with Joe Biden. Yeah, I'm reading from my script here. Yeah? He said, if Russia invades Ukraine, there will no longer be a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it. And the reporter was so puzzled. She said, huh? How is that possible? I mean, it's a project between Germany and Russia, and he said, I promise you, we will be able to do that. That was Joe Biden. Then we have U.S. Secretary of State Blinken. Yeah, Nord Stream sabotage is also a tremendous opportunity to once and for all remove the dependency on Russian energy. When we later will be discussing NATO, I will come to the very infamous statement from the first Secretary General of the NATO. I keep it for later. Yeah. Then Victoria Nuland, Assistant Secretary of State. Yeah, also infamous for her F the EU statement. Right. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream will not move forward. I have another one. Senator Ron Johnson. Yeah, he gets even a step further, because it almost appears that he's calling for the sabotage when he says, we are taking action that will prevent it from ever becoming operational. Let's not forget the former Polish foreign minister, Radek Sikorski, which said literally on a tweet, thank you USA, with a big picture of Nord Stream. I have a last one. It's Sarah Wagenknecht. She is a German parliamentarian, and she actually requested from the German government information, right? I have the original document here. The reply from the German government was, the requested information can't be provided due to the third-party rule, whatever it is, for international cooperation of intelligence services. They stated that the requested information is so sensitive that the interest of the state supersedes the right of information from the parliament. I mean, you have to let this sink in what it really means. Yeah? If they think that Russia blew up that Nord Stream 1 and 2, it would be all over the place. They would broadcast it with all means possible. So that's a question for you. What potentially could be so sensitive in regards to this sabotage that they do the opposite, right? They do not communicate anything, even to the German parliament. So what's your take?
I think it's obvious. I think it's obvious the United States did it, perhaps together with the UK. But this is obvious. We have the motive, the means, the opportunity, the statements, and the behavior of the governments in Europe. It's obvious. If there's something different, someone should say it and explain it. We apparently have, it's not verified, but we also apparently have tweets that were collected also by Russian intelligence and so forth, showing that the UK was involved. Or not tweets, I think it's an iPhone message, apparently reportedly from Liz Truss. This is very, very clear. If the president says we have our means, and I've been, living and watching this for decades, the United States destroys infrastructure of other countries. That's not an unusual thing to do. It's just that we're trying to be democracies. We're trying to understand. We're trying to save ourselves from Armageddon. We're trying to understand what's really happening. And it's not acceptable, in my view, that governments just lie or shut their mouths about this without explaining the realities of what's going on.
And what does it mean? Now, let's just be more prudent. Yeah? What would it mean if one or multiple NATO countries attacked the critical infrastructure? Because let's not be fooled about this. This is critical infrastructure, or was critical infrastructure, not only for Germany, but for Europe. If one or multiple NATO countries attack another NATO country, what does that mean?
Well, what it means is that we are in a terrible war right now, very dangerous, between the United States and Russia. The U.S. is using whatever means, not all so far, but we're on a path of escalation to nuclear war. It means that something as shocking as blowing up international infrastructure is part of it, but even more shocking than blaming it on the Russians. Now, that is absolutely dangerous, to do something so provocative and then blame it on the Russians. But that's par for the course.
So could it really be that the US is directly or indirectly involved in the Nord Stream attacks? Let's look at some other circumstantial facets of this story. Sweden, Denmark and Germany initially conducted a joint investigation into the attacks, but one country after the other ended its cooperation. The Swedish prosecutor Mats Lundqvist told Reuters, "This is because there is information in our investigation that is subject to confidentiality directly linked to national security." What could be so sensitive that the governments of 3 European countries decide to stop cooperating on a matter of national security because they're afraid of information being leaked? For the sake of argument, let's just say the Russians did it. What would be the logical reaction of Sweden, Denmark and Germany if they found irrefutable evidence that the Kremlin is behind the Nord Stream attacks? Would they not broadcast this news 24/7 around the globe to state their case? But what if it turned out that the US was involved? What's at stake in this scenario, and would that not explain the secrecy? First, the obvious. If it would become evident that the US was involved in the Nord Stream attacks, it could completely erode the support for the war and the already unpopular sanctions against Russia. If it became apparent that one NATO country attacked another's critical infrastructure, it could raise serious questions about the legitimacy of NATO. Even worse, it could cause a rift within NATO and Europe, especially at historical fault lines. I don't know if you follow this, but the relation between Germany and Poland is already cooling down, to put it mildly, and the same is true for Italy and France after Italy recently elected a right-wing populist government. But there's one more piece to the puzzle. If Europe can't get gas from Russia anymore and instead would be dependent on American LNG, what would you do if you were a European head of state? Would you make a big scene about the Nord Stream attacks, or swallow your pride and shut up, but keep your economy alive? Because that's what's literally at stake here. And while this is not a place to discuss Liz Truss' hacked cell phone, or why the UK government has suppressed its occurrence from getting public, it appears that Liz Truss sent a text message to Anthony Blinken just minutes after the blast that said, "It's done." So again, who did it? Well, you will have to decide for yourself. But one thing seems clear. Contrary to the BBC's claim, not everybody in the Western world thinks Putin blew up his own pipeline. On my part, and I never imagined that I ever would say this, but I agree with the arch-conservative Fox News anchor Tucker Carlson. He said,
"If you are Vladimir Putin, you would have to be a suicidal moron to blow up your own energy pipelines. That's the one thing you would never do."
If you're Vladimir Putin, you would have to be a suicidal moron to blow up your own $20 billion energy pipeline. Just some food for thought for those courageous enough to think it through. And that's it for today. Consider liking and subscribing if you appreciate the content. It costs you nothing and helps this channel. Thank you for watching.